Hey friends, this is Joseph Maynor. So what I want to do in this video is I want to talk a little bit about love, truth versus love, and some of the things that I noticed just participating on online communities for the past couple of weeks. My last video pretty much addressed the topic of groupthink, which is actually a really important topic. But what I notice is that there's something in addition to groupthink that's going on with a lot of people, which is this looping on a similar story or a similar narrative. This is a little different than groupthink. Groupthink is like we all share in a story, which forms the foundation for us relating together. Like we all like sushi, or we all like the 49ers, or we all like Neo Advaita, or we all like, the Bible, or Christianity, or something along those kinds of lines. That's groupthink. What I'm talking about is something that's much different. And it's actually, I've been caught up in this too. It's not groupthink. It's looping on a story or a narrative. And sometimes this can be thought of as like a, trauma bond maybe, or like for some reason, like you can't let something go. I think that like happens sometimes. That's not all of it though. Let me back up a little bit and let me explain how I'm a little bit different from this. So even though I tend to loop on narratives, I move in and out of things intuitively and I change. Like what you hear me talking about in this video is very different from what I talk about in my prior videos. Actually, every video I make in a way is different because I just let creation happen. I'm very conscious that I'm creating. And when I'm looping on something, I'm very conscious that I'm looping on something too. And I try to avoid that because as a jazz musician, you can see my trumpet behind me, my top hat. I'm going to be performing in a couple of days. But happy Thanksgiving, everybody, too, just to get that out of the way. But I open myself up and just let creativity flow through me like a conduit. And there's people who tend to loop on narratives. They criticize that about me. Like I sound like I'm all over the place. I'm not just like, it's like if I was a painter, I would not paint the same kind of painting over and over and over and over again. I'd be sort of like Miles Davis as a musician. I would make, every album I made would sound different. Or like David Bowie, another good example. But there are certain artists where they find one sound and they basically loop on that same sound their whole career. Like AC/DC, for example. I mean, almost every AC/DC album sort of sounds the same, right? That's not entirely true, like when you get into the band, but like it is, if you zoom out, it's very much true. Very different than like David Bowie, right? Where every album sounds really different. So, but also I think it's important not to try to make every album different as a creator. See, that's sort of like, on the one end of the spectrum, you're looping on narratives. On the other end of the spectrum, you're trying too hard to be different. It's like, stop doing all of that, right? That's my point, is like, and I'll tell you why. Because what it shows is that you're not conscious that you're trapping yourself. So for example, I've been doing spirituality now for, at least 10 years, right? I've known a lot of these people online for like 10 years. And some people, they run the same script all the time, right? It's like you're like, dude, this is what this person was talking about 10 years ago. It's almost like they just keep repeating the same story. It could be like, some story from their past, like when I was 20 years old, I took a psychedelic and I had these experiences. Well, it's like, you haven't done anything since you were 20 years old? Or let's rant about the materialists again or the rationalists again. Well, it's like, how many videos have you made doing that, right? I'm not dogging you. I'm just saying that, like, you're looping on a script there. You're not conscious that you're creating that. You know what I think it is? It's an unwillingness to just turn it on, right? Put the trumpet in your hands, put the top hat on, and just start playing it, right? You don't need a song even. You can create a song. You don't need a narrative. You can create it. Narratives will create themselves. Like, so for example, if I just start talking, a story will emerge. And I'm conscious that that's what's always happening. That's conscious creation, right? If you have a beauty awakening or, an artist's awakening, which comes after love. So I thought I was going to talk about love in this video. I am going to. So I created a couple of different paradigms for love. But before I do that, I want to finish up the first third of this video, just closing the loop on basically what I've been talking about here is don't let your narratives weigh you down. If it's groupthink, that's one thing, right? Because you're holding a group together with the narrative. But if it's just you repeating a narrative, it's like, how come that never changes with you? I mean, I feel like I'm bouncing all over the place. Like sometimes I'm talking about truth. Sometimes I'm talking about love. Sometimes I'm talking about beauty. Sometimes I'm talking about wisdom. Sometimes I'm talking about spiral dynamics. Sometimes I'm talking about just anything. Actually, the way I create is, I basically communicate with a lot of people for at least a week. And then I'll let, everything that's happened to me kind of sit with me. And then basically sometimes I'll have an idea, most of the time I don't. I'll just turn the video on and it's like, okay, here you go, bro. Here's your horn solo. Now go, right? Can you just create a song out of thin air? Now, the downside of this is that sometimes you don't have anything to talk about. Because you're like, okay, I could lean on some loops that I've already done, but I'm like, I don't want to do that. Like, I don't want to talk about stuff that's, to me, that's old, man. That's like, making the same album over and over and over and over and over again. Like, how boring is that? That's one of the reasons why I play jazz, actually. Because I can play a different solo every time. I can do anything I want as long as I obey the rules of music and the rules of that song. I can pretty much do anything I want to do. I can tell whatever story. I'm free to create. I'm free to be. I'm free to create. So what I want to do in this video is I do want to go back to a couple of models that I have for love, 2 models. But I just want to point out, notice this though, like these narratives that you loop on, this is a prison, man. It's a prison. It's no good. And it's just like, I can tell these people are trapped in this thing. They don't know how to get out of it, right? And what they do, it's kind of like a trauma purge kind of thing where it's like they vent about it and they talk about it, but then nothing ever changes. 5 years later, they're still hung up on the same issues. It could be like, whatever it is, it's personal to them though. It's some grievance that they have, right? And they're like imprisoned by it. And they just keep telling the story over and over and over and over and over again. And you want to tell this person, you don't have to do that. You know, you don't need to you don't need a nail to hang your hat on, right? You can hang your hat on the bell of your trumpet like I have back here. No, I mean, you don't. You can let all that go. And I find the reason why people are doing this is because they are hung up on truth, but they're hung up on truth in a way where they don't have absolute truth. So I'll explain that, and then I'll give you guys my two models for love that I will loop on a little bit and explain why I think these are important. So just give me 1 second. Hey friends, I'm back. So I had to put the hat on, right? I'm going to the Charles Dickens Fair in December. So, I'm kind of putting together an outfit for that. But so what I want to do in this part of the video is, one of the things I notice is that people, they think that truth is so important. And, so they get hung up on this idea of like needing to be right or needing to have something figured out. And so they just keep looping on, sort of the same stories over and over because they're basically trying to search for the truth, right? I like to say truth is a little bit of a double-edged sword for this reason. On the one hand, it's good to have a truth mentality for a lot of reasons. But on the other hand, it's a double-edged sword because it blocks your mind. Actually, your mind gets stuck in some kind of a story, a thought story of the past or of some philosophy or ideology or something along those lines. So there is something to be said to have a clear mind, right? And then you're like a conduit. Now, the way that you attain this is you attain absolute truth, right? I like to say it's really difficult to have a creator awakening or a conscious creator awakening or a beauty awakening until you have love and absolute truth. Why? Because with absolute truth isn't based on any kind of a narrative. It's not about fighting with anybody. In fact, you'll find that when absolute truth is attained, you're no longer in anyone's house, so to speak. Truth, in a way, is sort of like always being in somebody's house, right? There's always a boundary drawn. A good example of this would be, maybe you're in prison or you're living in your parents' house or you're in the wilderness or something, and a bear comes upon you. Well, whose house are you in? Are you in your house or are you in the bear's house? You're the whole predator-prey type thing. There's always a boundary around whose house are you in, right? Or whose house are you not in, right? That all goes away with absolute truth, because absolute truth doesn't hinge on any kind of a narrative. So it's not even like, some people get this all screwed up. They're like, well, everything's in my house, right? Like the world is originating through my eyeballs. Like I'm creating the world. No, you're in your house. You're basically putting everybody in your house, right, that way. So, but that's truth. Truth likes to do that. But the thing is, and you will do that if you're hung up on groupthink, if you're hung up on looping on your own narratives, if you're in somebody else's house, then you're going to feel the friction of them trying to get you to conform to their rules or whatever, right? This whole truth game That's the downside or the dark side of truth, really. But that's not what absolute truth is. Absolute truth is where you don't need any truth. It's not about narrative. It's inside, right? You're not offended by other people's truth anymore. Like, if somebody tells you, you're not trying to teach anybody anymore either, because really you can't teach anybody absolute truth. The best you can do is point to it, and that, if you want to create a lot of enemies, go ahead and do that, right? Become a teacher. I've done that for a long time too, and it just creates a lot of consternation, because you're basically implicitly always telling somebody no, or that they're wrong, right? All of these things go against the value of love, don't they? People want to be told that they want to be affirmed. You guys know about that book, like the what is it, like the four things that you can do to destroy a marriage? One of them is criticism. Truth implicitly sets up criticism, because you're wanting to be agreed with, or they're wanting you to agree with them. Somebody's wanting the other person to, either agree, or it's time to prove that this person needs correction or that this person is wrong. That's never going to work for love. So, but the solution here is not to drop truth. The solution is to find absolute truth. And sometimes this can take a long time. Like, honestly, I kind of just recently had a kind of truth awakening in this sense. Where it's like, what am I arguing with anybody for anymore? It doesn't do anything for me, and it's not doing anything for them. They didn't ask me. I wasn't put here to necessarily be an enlightenment teacher. So why not just teach something else? Teach the higher thing. The higher thing would be to point to absolute truth. To mention that it has nothing to do with words or philosophy or groupthink or looping on thoughts or anything like that. And then teach people how that opens up the door to love, and then that love opens up the door to beauty, or creation, so that you can become a conscious creator. And then having all of these opens the door to wisdom, ultimately. So this is just kind of my model. And I do loop on this loosely just because I created this model. But I'm not saying this has to be your model. It's just that I am a life coach, right? So I do have some theories that I use to structure. Like, you can't paint with no paints and no brushes, right? You can't make music without a horn, without a chromatic scale, without musical principles. So it's like, you can't talk about spirituality without words, without concepts. The first thing to realize is that when you've had an absolute truth realization, that is not hinged on any kind of language or any kind of philosophy. It doesn't work like that. It's an inner awareness, and it's not something you have to think about. It's something that is constant. But it's boundaryless, and it's not defensive. Like, other people don't bug you. Other people can't take away your absolute truth. Now, you're still going to react. You're still going to, if somebody's bullying you or doing something nasty towards you, you're still going to react like anybody else. So this myth that, once you become enlightened, you become this reactionless person, this is total bullshit, man. And This is a myth on the path. It doesn't work like that. I mean, you're still going to react just like any other thing. If somebody comes up to you and it punches you, you're going to be fighting with that person, or you're going to be running away. One of those, right? You're not just going to sit there and like turn the other cheek, right? That's total bullshit. Nobody behaves that way. But I think what they're pointing to is how attaining absolute truth actually changes how you act. It opens the door to love. So what I want to do in the last third of this video is I want to kind of forecast that a little bit. Give you a couple of models for love in a feminine direction and in a masculine direction after that. So just give me 1 second. Okay, friends, welcome back. So I think a couple of principles to move into love from a feminine direction. I'm talking about absolute love. I'm not talking about, love, human love. Although there's no duality between human love and absolute love, just like there's no duality between absolute truth and human truth. So there's no duality between human love and absolute love. And so what this means from a practical standpoint is you take the small self out of the shadow and you start to become really conscious of things like morality, how people treat people, shadow projection, right, that people do, hypocrisy, right? All the antisocial things that people do without even realizing that they're doing it. Usually because they're hung up on truth. They don't have absolute truth, but they're hung up on truth. So, there's nothing more dangerous than somebody who doesn't think that they have an ego, or somebody who thinks that they have it all figured out. So one of the things that you'll notice about feminine love is humility. It takes a very strong person to be loving, right? Insecure, notice this, the more insecure somebody is, I say like they lack abundance, the less loving generally they can afford to be. Because love means that you're sourced with truth inside. You have absolute truth. It's not something that you're ever jealous of. To be jealous of something would mean that it's not absolute truth. So you can relax and quote unquote be a human again. You can worry about things like right and wrong. I mean, ethics comes out of the shadow. You realize right away when you're projecting, when other people are projecting, you have a mentality where we all do it too. You don't give yourself a pass, right? Like, I'm totally unconditioned. Everybody else is a demon or something along those kinds of lines. That's not loving, right? I mean, I don't need to even explain why that's not loving. Somebody who's loving would take the exact inverse approach to that. They would say, tell me what your truth is, and I'm going to sit here and tell you that everybody is corrupt on some level. Even though I have absolute truth, I can go back into the human and I can talk like a human. There's no duality between the absolute and the human. Right? So that's what feminine love is like. It's not about humble bragging or diminishing yourself. Make no mistake. And it's not holding yourself back from your shadow either. You're still going to get angry. You're still going to fight with people. You're still going to nothing is going to change in that way. This myth of the enlightened person as a perfect saint, that's an archetype. That's a story. Now, this doesn't mean that you can't strive to become more loving. Like I said, there's not necessarily a duality between human love and absolute love. There doesn't have to be. So in theory, if you're having a love awakening, especially if you've already kind of developed absolute truth, you should show up in the world, generally speaking, in a more loving way. You can afford to be more loving. And I think from a feminine direction, it means post-truth awakening, integrating the small, integrating the human, integrating the ego and the shadow, integrating the persona, realizing everybody shows up with the persona, right? Including me. Be the first person to admit that you do it too, right? I'm no different than everybody else. It doesn't mean that we're all sinners either. See, that's a moral judgment that doesn't comport with reality. That comes from truth. We're talking about love now. No, some people are really hung up on projecting everybody else as a sinner. But see, what that shows me right away is that that's in your shadow. You feel that way about yourself, but you're the last one to admit that, because you have to be this lofty, like, you have this lofty persona that's actually not really true. And it's easy to pretend that way online, but I'm just saying, like, if you really want to move into feminine love, the ticket is to weaken the duality between the human and the divine, and to move back into the finite, but with the infinite integrated. So that's feminine love, very Jungian, right? And this, to me, this is a model. It's an archetype. It's a teaching. It's a pointer, right? Nothing more than that. It's a creation that I'm creating ultimately. That I'm not even, it's like being channeled through me too. So the idea that I'm creating, right, that's a story too. So that's a good segue now into masculine love. So I'll come back and I'll talk about how masculine love is the next stage after you've integrated feminine love. So just give me 1 second. Okay, friends, welcome back. So let me talk a little bit about masculine love. So imagine like a really kind grandfather, right? Or a really kind Zen master, where you just want to be in their presence. They're not judgmental, like they give you love to the extent that they want to help you, right? They're not trying to push any kind of ideology on you. They want to show you things. You enjoy being in their presence. They're not threatening. They're welcoming. They don't preach or teach or shame or diminish anybody. They're compassionate, but then also direct. But notice that this is not the person who's hung up on any kind of doctrine, right? They're beyond that. And they're beyond feminine love too. They don't need to sit and do all this development work anymore. They're just radiating. Now it's more about presence. It's more about being. So this is, I think, what Zen, part of what a more liberalized version of Zen, actually captures very well. But it's not even being against narratives, right? Because that would be another form of imprisonment, or another house that you've drawn around something. You don't need to do that anymore, right? You don't need to draw lines anymore. You just, you've integrated enough absolute truth and absolute love at this point where presence is really just enough. You don't need to be for or against anything. But you still will allow that to happen too. So it's about picking things up and putting things down, but also not having that be like some kind of like autistic, computer choice between A or B. Like that's not at all how it works, right? It's natural. It's natural. So, but of course, to get to this kind of masculine love, you have to have done quite a bit of work on the ego, right? From a human perspective too, or else you're never gonna achieve this, right? Unless you just happen to be a very open person. Some people, they're at this. Their personality puts them more naturally at this space, and so this is more natural for them to be here, and that's very fortunate for them, because once you have these two types of love, you're going to have more absolute love. So now you're going to have absolute truth, you're going to have absolute love. Then you can start moving into absolute beauty or conscious creation. So these are truth and love are sort of like the prerequisites. And I do not think, I keep saying this, I'm going to loop on this one final conclusion. I do not think truth and love are the same. In my experience, I have not met anybody who thinks that has actually integrated love very deeply at all. And I've known a lot of people in the spiritual world for a long time. I've interacted with them. It's like at some point you see who these people really are, even if they're online, and you're just like, okay, right? It doesn't really work like that. And so, these models that I'm giving are suggesting that love is indeed very different than truth, right? And it tends to be a further development after truth, in my experience, both for myself and witnessing other people who have integrated more love. Okay, friends, I'm a little bit over my time. Everybody have a great Thanksgiving, and I'll talk to you when everybody comes back. Take care.